Did you know that employee feedback is actually one of the most critical, most important components for organizations in order to really innovate, push forward, and really be productive into the future? I mean, think about it. Organizations, no matter how big or small, are made up of all those people, their contributions, their ideas. And when we can really give employees a system, a space for those feedback loops to happen, we're able to be more innovative with our products and services, but also create the culture, call out the behaviors we want to adjust, drive ourselves forward into success in the future. And that's why today, for Leap's weekly webinar, we're going to be talking about how to set up feedback loops that are actually successful. And this is where we miss the mark a little bit in organizations. So we're going to talk about it today. Now, to begin, my name is Ryan Boda, and I'm one of the founding partners and lead coaches at Leap Training and Coaching. This is one of my favorite things to talk about because it actually encompasses a lot of what I love, which is the science and the process side. So it's about systems, but it's also about people, relationships. And so it is a beautiful combination of science and art. And that is why today we're going to be able to go through these processes and really help you set up those feedback loops for success. So let's get started here. Now, I want to tell you a little story about one of my clients first. And he could have very easily fallen into a trap that we always do, which is there's a problem. So what do? We fix it as a leader. And so he was really dealing with a really tough problem. And finally he said, you know what? I'm going to bring the problem to my team and give them the space to provide feedback on what they think about my idea and what ideas do they have to work on it. And that's actually, first of all, very, very empowering in of itself for a leader to do, to actually give them a voice and to make them be on the same level in this decision making. And so he brought this idea or this problem to him. And what it was that they needed a budget cut that needed them to fire, and this is how he let it go. So they need to remove 3 FTEs, right? Full-time employees. And that was a really hard thing for him because he didn't really want to have to let go of 3 people just due to some budget cuts and some difficulties within their organization. So he brought this to him and said, this is what I've been tasked with my budget. What do we do? And by just opening the space and giving the employees some space to discuss and talk, he had one person come up to the board that had the 3 FTEs, and they put a line through it, and they wrote how many hours a week needed to be removed. And slowly they started the discussion where essentially they found out that some people were looking to take a day off a week and were willing to take that little pay decrease because, hey, I'd love to take Fridays off. I'm nearing retirement. And they had one person say, hey, I've got some family members I could take care of. And I've actually been meaning to try to adjust my schedule and so on. And what they ended up doing was not having to let anyone go. They reworked their schedules to allow for that budget decrease to happen, all within what people were really desiring. So by giving people a space, by empowering them for those feedback loops, you're giving them an ability to accept change in a new way, to go about their work, their processes, their frustrations, their excitement in a new way. And so it is so important that we have these feedback loops. And that's why the first part, with the whole description is about understanding the importance of them. And so first and foremost, the importance of feedback loops is all about engaging your employees. And engaging is about helping them be loyal, be motivated, to be inspired. And that's why you engage them through feedback loops. Because think about how much more loyal are you to your company when they listen to you, when they hear you? How much more motivated are you by your work? When you go, hey, when I have a problem, people don't yell at me. They give me the space to talk about it and get through it. Second part we really talk about is that, when it comes to feedback loops, we're definitely ensuring our voice is heard. And that is very powerful. Ensuring our employees' voices are heard. At times, especially the larger the company, sometimes we feel like a number. By providing feedback loops, we actually give people an ability to make sure their voice is heard. And the most important part of this, which we'll talk about later, is about that it becomes, when you ensure their voice is heard, you have to make sure you're listening and following up. listening and following up. And we're going to talk about that. And the last one we really talk about here is that by creating feedback loops, we're able to gain buy-in when there is something we need to change. By not just simply making decision, telling people what to do, by actually creating the feedback loops that say, tell me about your ideas about this. What do you have to offer? How can we handle this the best? How can we roll this out the best? Oh, we've rolled it out? What feedback do you have for us? Okay, what are some tweaks we can make to make this more effective? By giving that feedback loop, you're actually allowed to gain buy-in, to gain ownership over the initiatives, the ideas, the things that your organization is doing. And that is extremely, extremely powerful. So take, for example, just in this, these importances about engaging, ensuring our voice is heard, and really gaining the buy-in is, we had a client and they had a really, really tough team. It was about a team of 60 managed by one person, and they had a lot of dysfunction, a lot of problems. And what we found was it actually led back to that manager. What we found was that they really struggled with this feedback loop where when people brought them things, they just never heard back ever. And so in our process of working with them, we helped move them, and they actually hired a new lead for this team. And when they put this person in place, within the first month, we were doing some follow-up with other people, and we had this great story. And what this individual shared with us was this new leader, they brought something to them, something they were frustrated about. And this individual said, wow, first and foremost, she fully listened to me. She listened to everything I had to say, never snapped back, never, just sat and listened and said, here's what I'm going to do to follow up with you. And she said about a week later, that leader came back and said, hey, I followed up with blank, blank, and blank, and this is what I found out. Shared and said, I'm really sorry, there's nothing we can do about this. And the person who was sharing this story with us said, I didn't even care that nothing changed. I was so happy that I knew she listened to me, she followed up, she actually talked to people, and she came back to me. And that was the power of it. So our feedback loops can create a whole system in place that allows us to really connect with people. Now, let's talk about the science, right? That was part 2, science. Now, all I want to touch on is a very small amount of the science of the feedback loop system. Because at work, we have this thing, actually, you know what? In life, we have this thing in our brain. It's the first thing our thoughts go through. It is called our survival brain, right? It's our primitive reptilian brain that drives our fear, our instincts right away to jump into a triggered thing. And so we have a lot of unconscious triggers. And when it comes to feedback loops, that's one of the ones that comes up most. And so our survival brain wants to protect us. And so it doesn't want us to sound stupid in front of our peers, our friends, doesn't want us to have our ego hurt by, oh, I brought this idea and no one listened to me. So we need to understand that, hey, all of us have this survival brain. And it's about creating these loops, these systems and spaces and things that allow people to speak, and you have to keep reinforcing them so that you can quell that reptilian survival brain and allow people to really access this part of their brain, prefrontal cortex, which allows them to problem solve, to be creative and be innovative. And what actually happens is when you allow people in these feedback loops to be heard, to be followed up, to have their ideas implemented if need be, or really heard, no matter what it is, what you get is you get this little dopamine, serotonin hit. And what that really means is our brain releases some of these chemicals that actually give us a good feeling. That's why when we walk away from conversations that were just great, we feel good about them. And that's what feedback loops can do. They can make your employees feel heard, valued, give them that little dopamine hit where they're like, wow, I feel good about that relationship. I feel good about that conversation. And it becomes contagious. So understand that we all have that reptilian survival brain that we need to quell down. Let people access that prefrontal cortex, where when we do have feedback loops, it's not about complaining, issues, problems. It's about actually sitting down and saying, hey, there's something not quite right. Here's what I think we should do about it. Give them that access right here. Prefrontal cortex, they're going to come up with creative ideas, innovations, things that they can do to problem solve when it comes to these issues. Now, as I promised, It's important to know why. It's important to know why it's important, right? It's good to know the science, but now it's about what do we do? How do we implement? And so there's three pieces here I want to talk about. First and foremost, right, is more the science. It's the processes. And that's why number one is systems. And oftentimes companies do get this part fairly correct, right? We have systems. So most companies have annual performance reviews. That is a employee feedback loop. That is a place where I, as a leader, may provide feedback and I allow my employee to also provide feedback. Now, the question is, how effective are they? Do people really feel that they can speak up, be safe, saying to their leader, their manager, whether it be about a different person, whether it be about that leader, whether it be about themselves? Do they feel safe? Something to consider, right? We also have things like suggestion boxes. We have things like issue input committees, groups that are designed to, hey, when employees have issues, come speak to this committee, come speak and drop something in a box. Or we even have a system like an open door policy, right? So, oh, hey, anytime you need something, come on in. Now, nothing says these systems are bad, right? We need good systems in place, especially the larger a company gets, because it's harder to set up that ability to give employees a voice. But when it comes to the systems, it's always good to take a moment to reevaluate them, to see how effective are they. Talk to your employees, talk to your team and say, hey, I've got an open door policy. Do you guys notice that we have that? What do you think about it? Are we clear about it? Because what you may find out is they say, yeah, you have an open door policy, but you're always on the phone with the door shut. And you go, oh, shoot, I probably need to set an hour a day where I really set some space where I'm going to work on my projects, but my door is open for people, right? So you might find that though we set the systems, they're not always the most effective. So reviewing, talking to the people who are supposed to utilize them and saying, hey, we have a suggestion box. What do you think about it? Is it effective? Have you ever put anything in it? Has anyone ever contacted you when you put something in it? And so on. So really look at those systems and make sure that they're in place to be successful, to be utilized by the people that they need to be utilized. Not just because, oh, you're upset, go put it in the suggestion box. It needs to be really for a purpose. The second spot here is about space. So we said we need systems and we need space. And what this space is really about is, okay, yeah, we may have a great system in place, right? But how do we actually give people the space to speak up? Like, encourage them to speak up. And if this is something that you're wondering and saying, hey, no, we really do have good places, good systems in place, but I cannot get people to speak up. I want you to come back next week or on our next video, right? And really watch that one, because it's all about how do we empower employees to use their voices. And that's about the space that we create. And so what I would encourage you is that as a leader, the space is first and foremost about listening. If you have an open door policy, it means that I am not looking at my computer while I'm listening to you. I move my computer, I turn, I give you my full attention, and I fully listen to you. And this is the other part. You do not speak while someone else is listening. That is extremely difficult. But just sit, really listen. The first thing out of your mouth when they are done should be a question. Is there anything else you want to share? Tell me a little bit more about blank. No matter what it is, but it should be a question. It should be, I'm curious to learn more. That is where you create an atmosphere, an energy, an environment that people want to listen to. They want to speak up in. And the second part is follow-up. And that is that after I sat and listened to you and I poured out some of my ideas, my frustrations, my sadness, my hurt, whatever it is, I hope you don't just not do anything, right? As an employee, I want my leader to do something. Go back to our story. They couldn't do anything about what that person was upset about. But just the fact that you followed up, you did your steps, and you went back to that individual and shared, here's where we're at. That's powerful. So when it comes to space, number one, listen. Work on your listening skills every day. And number two, follow up. And the third thing, which you hear us say all the time, is appreciation. Just when it comes to employee loops and feedback, understand that appreciation, just acknowledging each individual's contribution, ideas, talking about a we all the time. Sometimes people say, hey, with appreciation, I know they don't want to be given a trophy. They don't want to be called out in front of others. That's okay. Know your people. If you're a culture that loves trophies, great. Make a fun idea trophy for these feedback loops. If you're not, if you're one that maybe prefers a handwritten note, that's perfect as well. Write a little handwritten note. Let them understand that you appreciate that they brought this to you, and you want them to know that if they have anything else, just always come in, stop in, and talk to me. It goes a long ways, appreciating and acknowledging. It actually bursts those dopamine out into your brain, just like I said about the way that we feel when our ideas are heard and valued. It's the same thing when we're appreciated. It only happens in the prefrontal cortex, and we're engaged, problem solving, we're more compassionate with it. So just know, when it comes to feedback loops, it's the three things. It's the systems, right? It's the systems that are in place. It's the space, right? And then it's about appreciating and acknowledging that they're bringing it to you. So I would highly encourage you, come back next week. Check out that next video. It's really going to be about, now, we set up these spaces, but how do we actually get people to use their voices? And so I really appreciate you being here today. Again, I am Ryan Boda. I'm one of the lead coaches here at Leap Training Coaching. We're always here to provide as much value as possible. So please feel free to share this with anybody who you think could use some value, your leaders, your teams, and understand that how to set up feedback loops that are actually successful is one of the most critical, valuable things that an organization can invest time, energy, and investment and finances into. Thank you. Appreciate you being here, and I look forward to seeing you